It's early April, 2011, in Akademgorodok, just outside Irkutsk in Russia. A man goes into his nephew's room to borrow a camera. He starts scrolling through the gallery, just flicking through photos without really paying attention, when he suddenly stops. There's a video there, 8 minutes long. The thumbnail doesn't give anything away, just snow, trees, empty woodland. The sort of thing you'd normally skip straight past. Still, out of curiosity more than anything, he clicks on it. The footage is shaky, grainy, clearly amateur, but it's clear enough to understand what you're looking at. There's a woman lying in the snow. She isn't moving. And pretty quickly, it becomes obvious why. She is already dead. The woman was later identified as Alevtina Kuidina, a 63-year-old homeless woman, killed on April 3, 2011, beaten to death with repeated hammer blows to the head. As his uncle keeps watching, he realizes the person holding the knife in the video is his own nephew, Nikita. And what's disturbing isn't just what he's doing, but how he's doing it. There's no rush, no panic. He's slow, deliberate, almost methodical. He starts cutting the earlobe, then moves to the wrists, then the eyes. Some attempts don't really work, others do. He keeps stabbing again and again, into her face, into her eye, until her features are completely destroyed. There's nothing recognizable left. While Vladislav Volkov, his uncle, watches the video, he notices something else. There's another voice. Not Nikita's. Someone behind the camera. Calm. Detached. Almost bored. Commenting on what's happening. Directing it. Like they're discussing something trivial. How disgusting to touch her. Bit. What else shall we do with her? That voice belongs to Artyom Anufriev. And the most unsettling part is that the whole time, these two boys are just chatting, laughing even, like none of this means anything at all. His uncle stops the video. Within hours, that camera is sitting on a desk at Irkutsk police headquarters. And within days, arrests are made. On April 5th, 2011, 2 teenagers are taken into custody. 18-year-old Artyom Alexandrovich Anufriev and 17-year-old Nikita Vakhtangovich Litkin. As investigators begin digging into their history, something far worse comes to light. Alevtina Kuidina wasn't their first victim. Between November 2010 and April 2011, in the space of just 5 months, these 2 boys turned a quiet district of Irkutsk into a hunting ground. They targeted vulnerable people, elderly women, homeless men, and even a 12-year-old child. This wasn't random violence. In their minds, this was a mission. A season where Artyom and Nikita set out to prove they were more than men, that they were something else entirely. Gods, as they called themselves in their online posts. They confess almost immediately. 6 completed murders, 9 attempted murders, robbery, corpse desecration. All carried out along the snowy paths of Akademgorodok, the Soviet-era academic town. And they aren't ashamed. If anything, they're proud. Artyom is genuinely annoyed that they were caught too soon, before they could finish what they'd planned. Because there was a plan, a number they wanted to reach. They'd been studying other killers online, learning from them, idolizing them, treating them like legends. And they wanted the same thing, to be remembered, to have their names live on. Eventually, the media gives them a name. Some name them the Hammermen, others the Academy Maniacs. But the real question is, how does something like this even begin? The Akademgorodok town, which translates to Academy Town in English, tells you everything you need to know about what it was supposed to be. It was built as a planned community for scientists and academics. The idea was simple enough. You gather all the brightest minds in one place, give them resources, and let them work and innovate. During the Cold War, this sort of thing was crucial. The Soviets needed cutting-edge research. They needed to compete with the West. So they built these academic towns all over Russia, little pockets of intellectualism in the middle of nowhere. For a while, it worked. Akademgorodok in Irkutsk was home to research institutes, universities, laboratories. It had a certain prestige to it. If you lived there, you were part of something important. But then, again, 1991 happened.
During these last few months, you and I have witnessed one of the greatest dramas of the 20th century, the historic and revolutionary transformation of a totalitarian dictatorship, the Soviet Union.
The funding stopped almost overnight. Research programs were abandoned. Institutes shut their doors. Some of the scientists left for opportunities abroad. Others moved to Moscow or Petersburg, where there was still money to be had. The ones who stayed behind watched as their neighborhoods slowly decayed around them. By 2010, Akademgorodok wasn't an academic town anymore. It was just a town. A cold, isolated, slightly eerie place where the buildings were too big for the number of people living in them, where the streets felt empty even during the day. The population skews older. A lot of the residents are pensioners, elderly people who've lived there for decades and have nowhere else to go. There are also homeless people, quite a few of them actually. They shelter in the abandoned buildings, the forgotten corners of the district. And then there are the young people, the ones born into this place, the ones who grew up surrounded by decay and emptiness and the ghosts of what used to be. Kids like Artyom and Nikita. Artyom Alexandrovich Anufriev was born on the 4th of October 1992. His mother raised him alone. An accountant in an insurance firm. Steady job, steady life on paper. But his father, gone early. Vanished from the picture before Artyom could form memories of him. But on the surface, Artyom was the success story. He was a high achiever, a musician, and a member of a local legal club. Friends from childhood would later tell the court he seemed normal, polite, well-liked even. Played in a little school rock band. Good grades at first. But behind closed doors, the home wasn't warm. His mother, by her own later accounts and those of school staff, had a way of seeing enemies everywhere. If teachers gave him poor marks, she would blame them. And when things went wrong at school, she never blamed her son. It was always someone else's fault. The teachers, the system, the other students. She wouldn't accept any pressure on her son. She wrote letters of complaint, defended him fiercely. Some said she taught him to hate, to resent a world that didn't bend to him. The headmaster once remarked she instilled in Artyom a deep mistrust of others, a belief that people were out to get him. And so the boy learned early, the world is hostile. Trust no one. There's a video from his final year of high school. His class made an amateur film where everyone shared their views on what happiness meant to them. When it was Artyom's turn, he admitted something telling. He said he didn't know what happiness was, but he wanted to learn. After graduating, Artyom enrolled at Irkutsk State Medical University. He also worked part-time as an auxiliary worker in an art museum. On paper, he was doing everything right. higher education, employment, a path forward. But something had shifted in him. Or maybe it had always been there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. Then there was Nikita Vakhtangovich Litkin, born on 24th March 1993, just 5 months after Artyom. His mother, Marina, sold shoes in a shop. His great-grandparents had been hydraulic engineers, proud builders of the great Siberian dams. See, Nikita also started well. Good pupil, exemplary behavior, won prizes in creative contests, played video games like any boy. But by the time he reached the mathematics class in 2004, bright enough to get in, the other children didn't accept him. His mother later said he was rejected, bullied, mocked. The bright, quiet lad began to withdraw. Friends drifted. By secondary school, he was described as depressed, an emo loser, closed off, a target. So, if Artyom was the fire, Nikita was the void. He was profoundly isolated, suffering from bouts of deep depression after his father abandoned the family. He didn't just feel like an outsider, he felt like a ghost. So, when these two found each other at a friend's birthday party, it was like throwing petrol on a fire. They didn't find friendship. They found a shared frequency of resentment. Nina, Artyom's mother, didn't like Nikita. Not at all. She actively spoke against the friendship, told her son that Nikita was a bad influence, that their friendship should be banned. In reality, Artyom was already spending a lot of time online, dipping into white power skinhead culture, nationalist ideas, a need to belong somewhere fierce. He even attended a nationalist demonstration in Moscow called the Russian March. He was actively participating in far-right political movements. Artyom introduced Nikita to the skinhead groups he was involved with, but there was something there they didn't expect. Ironically, Nikita wasn't accepted by the neo-Nazis. His patronymic, Vakhtangovich, marked him as having Ossetian heritage, and the skinheads considered that discrediting. So even in the extremist circles Artyom moved in, Nikita was an outsider, rejected, again. But Artyom didn't care. Artyom accepted him, and that was enough. And in the years that followed, something darker took root. As their friendship deepened, Artyom began to change. He'd been popular, remember? He had friends, a social life. But gradually, all of that fell away. His other friends drifted off. He became more isolated, more withdrawn. He was becoming more like Nikita. Or maybe he was just finally showing who he'd always been underneath the mask. By their mid-teens, the world had shrunk for Artyom and Nikita, but the internet opened a door. A door to people who celebrated the anger, who said weakness deserved punishment. Together, they spent hours online, searching for content, violent content, videos of murders, documentaries about serial killers. They weren't just passively consuming this stuff. They were studying it, like schoolwork they actually cared about, looking for inspiration. And they found it. They found the infamous Russian cases that had already become legendary in those dark corners of the internet. Andrei Chikatilo, known as the Rostov Ripper, one of the most notorious serial killers in Soviet history. Over more than a decade, from the late 1970s into 1990, he murdered at least 52 people, mostly women and children, in extremely brutal ways that involved rape, mutilation, evisceration, and even cannibalism in some instances. Artyom posted a portrait of him online on 13th February 2011, just one day before the anniversary of Chikatilo's execution, with a simple caption, "Andrei Romanovich, we grieve."
Так, смотри, я сейчас Валентину Александровну начну будить. За чай провожать.
Then there was Alexander Pichushkin, known as the chessboard killer. He targeted dozens of victims in Moscow's Bitsa Park over many years, eventually convicted of 48 murders, though he claimed far more, aiming to reach 64 to fill every square on a chessboard. They caught a television program about him back in 2007 and watched it closely, drawn to the cold control he exercised, the sheer scale of his body count, and the widespread fear he managed to create. But the thing that truly ignited them came from Ukraine. The Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs, Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk, later with a third accomplice. In just a few weeks during the summer of 2007, these teenagers carried out 21 murders using hammers, pipes, screwdrivers, and other everyday tools. The attacks were random and savagely violent, and the worst part was that they filmed many of them. One video in particular became infamous across the internet. 3 guys, 1 hammer. It showed the prolonged, merciless killing of a homeless man named Sergei Yatsenko. Repeated hammer blows, stabbing with a screwdriver, the screams fading as the killers laughed and kept recording every detail. That video became their blueprint, their instruction manual. But the clearest expression of their worldview came from their online activities. Because Artyom and Nikita were extremely active on Vkontakte, the Russian equivalent of Facebook, and they weren't hiding what they believed. Artyom moderated a group on VK with a chilling name. We are gods. We decide whom to live and who will die. But after Artyom's arrest, the group was renamed as Help Artyom Anufriev. The members tried to raise money for his defense. In that old group, and on their personal pages, they posted without shame photos, lyrics, rants, glorifications of violence. They shared music too, their own bands. Together they formed Dismembered Pugacheva. The name was a deliberate, obscene twist on Alla Pugacheva, Russia's most famous pop singer, basically the ultimate national icon, adored by millions for decades as the glamorous Queen of Russian pop. By slapping dismembered onto her name, they turned something wholesome and beloved into pure shock value gore fantasy. Songs with titles designed to shock, lyrics full of violence, profanity, misanthropy. Inspired by American grindcore like Anal Cut, bands they covered and uploaded digitally. Raw, aggressive, noise that matched their mood. Artyom also had his own projects. Zlie Gnomi, Evil Gnomes. More tracks laced with hate. A short-lived punk project full of violent, hateful lyrics. They recorded in bedrooms, shared online. Small audiences at first, but it fed the fantasy. The internet gave them a stage, and they stepped onto it. And as time went on, their posts and comments grew darker. On December 22nd, 2010, someone in the National Socialism/White Power VK group, where Artyom was an active member, posted an image with the bold text, "Killing is fun." The caption underneath read, "I haven't checked yet, but I think that's how it is." Then, on January 1st, 2011, Artyom himself commented on it. "Still, it's worth checking." And that wasn't sarcasm or some dark joke. He was speaking from experience. The words on the screen weren't enough anymore. The fantasies needed flesh, needed sound. So from late 2010, Artyom and Nikita began their nightly patrols. Same route every time. From the State University bus stop, down Lermontov Street, past the hills, into the quieter stretches where the pines closed in and the lights thinned. Between 6 and 10 in the evening, they passed dozens of people, watched, waited, chose the vulnerable. So on November 14th, 2010, they targeted their first victim. An 18-year-old girl, Anastasia Markovskaya, walking home from school. They came from behind, a blow to the head. Anastasia crumples to the ground, but she's conscious, terrified, and she does the only thing she can think of. She pretends to be dead. And it works. Eventually, something frightens the boys off. They run, and Anastasia survives. Afterwards, she goes to the police station to file a report, but nothing comes of it. The officers don't open a criminal case, saying nothing was stolen and that she couldn't identify who attacked her. Later on, she writes about the attack online, describing the terror of what happened to her. The killers read her post and replied anonymously. They acted concerned, feigning sympathy. A lot of their digital trail has disappeared over time, but the interaction itself is documented in court documents and covered by Russian outlets. The first murder didn't happen until December 1st, 2010. That day, a 12-year-old boy named Danil Semyonov, who went to the same school as them, was out riding his snow scooter on a nearby hill. Just a kid messing about in the snow. Nikita notices him and, almost casually, suggests to Artyom that they kill him. And Artyom agrees. They chase the boy down. When they catch him, Litkin hits him from behind with a mallet, hard enough to knock him to the ground. And once he's down, Anufriev steps in and continues beating him with a baseball bat until it's over. Then, just 2 weeks later, on December 16th, 2010, it happens again. This time, barely 20 meters from where Danil was killed. The victim is 69-year-old Olga Mikhailovna Pirog, a leading researcher at the Institute for Solar and Terrestrial Physics. She's attacked in the same way. When her body is found, investigators count 30 knife wounds. Her money and jewelry are still there. Nothing is taken. And if you're paying attention to the timeline, this is where it gets even more unsettling. On January 1st, 2011, the very same day Artyom leaves the comment, "Still worth checking," on a V-Kontakte post in a National Socialist white power group talking about killing for fun, they strike again. This time, the victim is a homeless man, alone near some rubbish bins. They beat him relentlessly, inflicting around 40 blows and smashing his head with their mallets. And from there, the pattern doesn't change. The attacks keep coming, carried out in much the same way, again and again. By the time it's over, 6 people are dead. 9 more are injured. 15 lives destroyed in less than 5 months. And they weren't choosing their victims out of personal hatred. It wasn't about who these people were as individuals. It was about what they represented. Weakness, vulnerability, proof in their minds that they, the outcasts, had the power to decide who lived and who didn't. Now, you might be wondering why it took so long to catch them. 5 months, 15 victims. How did 2 teenagers manage to terrorize an entire district for that long without getting caught? The answer's pretty simple, actually. Nobody thought it was 2 teenagers. Police, at first, treated the attacks as separate incidents. Robberies gone wrong, drunken brawls, random violence in a quiet place. They were looking for an adult, probably someone with a criminal record, maybe a drifter. They thought the attacks were too brutal, too calculated. Plus, Artyom and Nikita had something working in their favor. They were locals. They belonged there. Artyom was popular at school. Nikita was quiet, kept his head down. Nobody suspected them. And on top of that, most victims fit a particular profile. Elderly, homeless, people on the margins of society whose disappearances wouldn't immediately raise alarm bells. In some cases, it took days before anyone even reported them missing. But the bodies kept appearing. The survivors' stories piled up. Panic grew. Residents demanded action. The suburb was on edge. By early 2011, residents were terrified to go out after dark. Parents kept their children inside. The elderly, who'd lived in Akademgorodok for decades, suddenly felt unsafe in their own neighborhood. Community groups formed. They called themselves People's Squads. But it wasn't enough. Because Artyom and Nikita were careful. They were patient. They'd wait for hours if they had to. They'd watch. They'd plan. And when the moment was right, when someone was isolated enough, vulnerable enough, they'd strike. By the time the police began piecing it together based on survivor descriptions, young men, hooded, average build. Realizing they were dealing with a serial killer, or killers, plural, Artyom and Nikita had already racked up a significant body count. But eventually, as we now know, the two lads made a mistake. They filmed one of the murders. And that camera, by pure chance, ends up in the hands of Nikita's uncle, who takes it straight to the police. From there, everything moves fast. Within hours, 2 addresses in Akademgorodok are raided. Officers from the Criminal Investigations Unit turn up. There's no resistance, no drama. Nikita Litkin is picked up first. By that point, his relatives have already spoken to him, urged him to hand himself in. He doesn't argue. He doesn't panic. If anything, he seems almost relieved. He just walks out quietly. Then they go for Artyom Anufriev. He's at home. There's no struggle, no last-minute escape attempt. He's handcuffed without a word. Both are taken to the station and questioned that same evening. And by midnight, it's over. The confessions start coming. Voluntary, detailed, almost clinical. Searches of their flats continue into the early hours of the morning. Investigators find hammers, mallets, knives, blood-stained clothes, diaries, digital files, and the camera itself. The evidence piles up. It's overwhelming. And for the first time in months, the suburb exhales. The fear that had been hanging over Akademgorodok begins to lift, replaced by something else entirely. Disbelief. People expected outsiders, someone passing through. Instead, it was local lads, from the same streets, and an academic town left staring at its own nightmare. In the days following their confessions, investigators conduct what's known in Russian criminal procedure as an investigative experiment. A crime scene reconstruction where the suspects are taken back to the locations of their attacks to demonstrate exactly how they committed the crimes. The reconstruction proceeds. They walk through the crime scenes, they point, they explain, they demonstrate. And it's all captured on video. Footage that would later be shown in court. Evidence that makes their confessions undeniable. "16 months pass after their arrest. 16 months filled with investigations, psychiatric evaluations, and mountains of evidence being pulled apart piece by piece. And eventually, it all leads to one thing: the trial. The formal judicial investigation runs from September 5th, 2012 through to February 11th, 2013. Over that period, investigators question 16 victims and hear testimony from more than 50 witnesses. Psychiatric assessments follow. Both Artyom and Nikita are examined in detail, and the conclusion is blunt. They're found to be sane, fully aware of what they did, fully responsible. There's no diagnosis of severe mental illness, no grounds for diminished responsibility. Instead, the reports describe a mix of traits: high aggression, low empathy, narcissistic tendencies, thrill-seeking behavior, and a deep, simmering resentment. When prosecutors lay out their case, it's comprehensive. Physical evidence, digital records, witness testimony, all pointing to coordinated attacks driven by a shared ideology rooted in misanthropy. They argue that Artyom acted as the driving force, the instigator, while Nikita carried out much of the violence. Together, they say, the two formed an extremist group inspired by what they called people-hater doctrines. And then comes the final stage of the trial, the moment where both defendants are given the chance to speak for themselves. Nikita's defense focuses on his childhood. His lawyer points to a history of obsessive-compulsive disorder and neurotic symptoms, pushing for a new psychiatric evaluation and arguing that his sentence should be capped at 20 years. His online activity, they insist, wasn't genuine extremism, but provocation, teenage posturing taken too far. When the time came for Artyom to have his final say in court, he read from a prepared statement without interruption, almost as if he'd rehearsed it. He spoke about the stain the case had left on him and on his family's name, and made a sort of plea for forgiveness. At the same time, though, he pushed back against the full weight of the accusations. In his own words, he suggested the media had coloured everything, that now there was a mark on him he couldn't wash away, and that some of what he was accused of wasn't proven as the prosecution claimed. He only admitted guilt in the murder of Olga Pirog and in filming the video, he said, and insisted he couldn't explain what came over him or why he'd done it. But the evidence in the case was overwhelming. The video footage, the weapons, the bloody clothing, the diaries, their digital footprint. There was no room left for reasonable doubt. On April 2nd, 2013, the Irkutsk Regional Court handed down its sentence. Artyom Anufriev was given life imprisonment to be served in a special regime colony, the harshest punishment available under Russian law. The judgment itself dwelt on a lot of grim details: the deliberate planning, the use of hammers and blades, and acts so brutal that placing victims' heads on railings was noted as evidence of exceptional cruelty, something the court said justified the maximum sentence. Nikita Litkin was sentenced to 24 years imprisonment, 5 of those to be served in a regular prison, and the remainder in a strict regime colony. Under the terms of his sentence, if he lives long enough to be released, he'll spend a further year restricted in movement and forbidden from leaving the territory. The sentence has about 150 pages. It's read out for 8 hours. Nikita is visibly nervous, but doesn't lower his eyes during the sentencing. Artyom stares indifferently at the floor the whole time. But when he hears the judge's verdict, he falls on the bench and weeps. On October 3rd, 2013, the Supreme Court of Russia reviews the sentences. Artyom's life sentence is approved, unchanged. But Nikita's sentence is reduced from 24 years to 20 years. His minor age at the time of the majority of murders is taken into account. This reduction reflects judicial acknowledgement of his subordinate participation, but it doesn't excuse the premeditated violence. On January 27, 2014, Artyom Anufriev is transferred to Ogneny Ostrov in the Vologda Oblast. He became the youngest prisoner there at the time. The penitentiary is part of the Federal Penitentiary Service in the Belozersky district, about 460 kilometers north of Moscow. Some experts say the prison is more comfortable and the guards less cruel compared to other Russian prisons housing lifers, but others paint a different picture. A Western description of the prison states, "In a country where brutality and hopelessness are common currency, Petak is as bad as it gets. There is none of the communal fighting, rape and drunkenness common in some Russian prisons, but the regime is so unbending and inhuman that it eventually crushes even the toughest inmates. There are no lavatories, no proper washing facilities, and you spend your whole life in a cell." And that's where Artyom is for the rest of his life. In April 2014, journalists from Komsomolskaya Pravda interviewed him, and Artyom makes it clear that he does not repent at all. He does not consider himself guilty, even now, even after everything. He maintains his innocence.
Я не маньяк. Вот я не маньяк. Я убийца, но не маньяк. Маньяки это вот такие вот, которые вот там за стеной стоит, которые уши режут.
Никита.
Да. Я не знаю, с чего он стал таким. По-видимому, на него тоже вот это вот интернет повлиял, вся вот эта дребедень.
Nikita, meanwhile, gives multiple interviews where he's remarkably candid.
Ну, там в первую очередь пример брали.
С кого?
Ну, с других уже. Ну, убийства. Ну, из днепропетровских маньяков там. Ну, в Новолине там. Магия крови там была.
According to investigator Yevgeny Karchevsky, Nikita admits that he could not have committed the murders alone, since it wasn't interesting to one. In a number of interviews, Nikita also states that he would have continued to kill if he hadn't been arrested. Nikita's journey through the prison system is very different. In 2015, he's moved to correctional colony number 41 in Kemerovo. And here's where things get a bit complicated. Because at Kemerovo, a court-ordered forensic psychiatric evaluation diagnoses him with a severe mental disorder. As a result, in August 2016, the Zavodsky District Court of Kemerovo rules that he should be released from prison and placed in a psychiatric hospital for compulsory treatment. But before this ruling is implemented, Nikita does something shocking. He attacks another inmate, strikes him multiple times with a metal dustpan in the toilet area of the prison's medical unit. The victim survives. Other prisoners intervene to stop Nikita. According to investigative records, Nikita later admits that the attack was a deliberate attempt to receive a life sentence and be transferred to a different penal colony, specifically to be housed in the same facility as Artyom. But Nikita Litkin did not succeed in bringing the crime to its logical conclusion. During incarceration, Nikita reportedly struggles with prolonged isolation periods, which criminologist Anatoly Kustov attributes as a potential factor in his mental state, exacerbating underlying antisocial traits over the decades served. On November 30th, 2021, after serving half his 20 years, he took his own life in prison. Slit wrists. A final act of control or despair. He was 28 years of age. Artyom and Nikita were inspired by the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs. Who knows who will be inspired by Artyom and Nikita? Their videos are still out there. Their story is still being told. And in certain corners of the internet, they're being celebrated, romanticized, turned into fan art and fan fiction, and edits set to music. Online radicalization moves fast. Ideas spread like frost. And suddenly, killing feels possible. And we know now, such things repeat. Unless watched for, unless interrupted early. So watch the quiet ones. Listen to the anger before it hardens, and teach empathy where isolation breeds. I'll leave it there for today. If this story unsettled you, good. It should. And if you want to stick around, you can like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you next time. Stay vigilant. And as always, thank you for watching.